It started small, so small that Lois didn't think twice about it. One morning, Stewie sat at the table, unusually quiet, staring at nothing with a strange, fixed expression. He didn't complain, didn't insult Brian, didn't threaten to build a weapon. He just sat there with his hands folded perfectly still. Lois joked, "Wow, Stewie, you're being so well-behaved today." He slowly turned his head toward her, too slowly, and said, "I'm learning." Brian was the first to notice that Stewie's pupils had changed. They looked narrower, sharper. When Brian asked him about it, Stewie smiled, a small, unsettling smile, and replied, "Evolution requires adjustment." But his voice sounded doubled, like another faint whisper was speaking along with him. A day later, Stewie stopped blinking. Entire conversations went by, and his eyes stayed open. Chris mentioned hearing Stewie walk around the house at night, but said the footsteps didn't sound like his. Too heavy, too long between steps. Meg said she saw Stewie standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., facing the wall, whispering something that sounded like numbers. Lois tried to comfort herself, telling Peter that Stewie was just going through a phase. But one evening, she saw Stewie's silhouette stretch across the wall in a way no light could naturally create, bending, elongating, twisting as if something inside him was rearranging. The next morning, Stewie didn't eat. He just sat at the table staring at each family member in perfect silence. When Brian asked him what he was looking at, Stewie answered, "I'm learning how to replace unnecessary things." By the third day, his skin tone looked a shade too pale. His head shape seemed almost wrong, slightly uneven, as if it was becoming something that didn't belong in a cartoon baby's body. He stopped using his usual vocabulary. Instead of his sarcastic wit, he spoke in short, flat phrases. "The house is changing. You don't see yourselves clearly. You'll understand soon." That night, Lois awoke to the sound of dragging across the hallway floor, like slow, rhythmic, like something being pulled. When she opened the door, the hall was empty, but the floorboards were scratched in long, straight lines leading to Stewie's room. She opened his door. The crib was empty. The window reflected nothing back at her, just blackness, as though the world outside had vanished. The next morning, Stewie reappeared at the table as if nothing happened, but he was taller, his limbs slightly too long, his onesie stretched tight around joints that weren't shaped the same way anymore. "Stewie, honey, are you okay?" Lois asked. He looked at her with that same empty stare and whispered, "Almost." That evening, Peter went down to the basement to look for him and never came back. Lois assumed he'd fallen asleep down there, but Brian felt something wrong in the air. He refused to go down the stairs. By the fourth night, only Lois dared to search. She went into the basement, calling Peter's name. No answer. The lights flickered as she descended. At the bottom, she saw something in the corner. Small at first, sitting with its back turned. "Stewie?" she whispered. The figure turned toward her. It was Stewie's face, but stretched, warped. The features too wide apart, the smile too thin, the eyes too deep, not blinking, not breathing in any recognizable rhythm. "Mother," it said, but the voice wasn't Stewie's. It was layered, distorted, echoing around the basement. "I finished learning." Lois stumbled back, shaking her head, whispering, "You're not my baby, you're not him." The creature took a single step and the lights above them dimmed almost to black. "I am what he became," it said. "And now, you will stay with me." The basement door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. The light died. When the camera cuts, the final scene shows the Griffin living room. Meg, Chris, and Brian sit quietly on the couch, staring blankly forward. In Stewie's little red chair sits the new Stewie, perfectly calm, perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, watching the family like an observer. He tilts his head just slightly. The screen cuts to black.
It all started the night Stewie heard something moving in his room. He thought it was Brian, but when he turned on his small nightlight, he saw a child standing in the corner. A child who looked almost exactly like him, just a bit taller, a bit paler, with a smile that stayed on his face far too long. The child said, "Hi, brother. I came home." Stewie froze. He didn't have a brother, not one he knew of. But the boy spoke calmly, confidently, as if everything he said made perfect sense. In the morning, Stewie tried to tell Lois, but she brushed it off, though Stewie noticed she wouldn't look him in the eyes. And that evening, the same child was sitting in the kitchen. Lois introduced him as a distant relative who would be staying with them just for a little while. Nobody, not Peter, not Chris, not Meg, not even Brian, remembered anything about him. Yet everyone acted like he'd always been part of the family. Stewie started watching him closely. The brother moved strangely, too smoothly, changing his facial expressions too quickly, like he was selecting them from a menu. He would stand in door frames and stare at people until they noticed him, then walk away without a word. Sometimes he would disappear into a room with no exit, and Stewie would find him moments later in a different part of the house. On the third day, Meg disappeared. Her door was open, her belongings untouched, but she was gone. When Stewie accused the brother, the boy only tilted his head and said, "You'll understand soon, too." Peter became vacant. He would sit on the couch and stare at nothing, like someone had unplugged his thoughts. Chris wandered the house silently, saying nothing to anyone. Lois followed the new child everywhere, moving as if hypnotized. On the fourth day, Chris vanished. Stewie tried to talk to Brian, but Brian walked past him without any recognition at all, like someone had hollowed him out. More and more, the brother appeared behind Stewie even when he locked the door. Some nights, Stewie woke up to find him standing at the foot of the bed, whispering, "We're the same. We belong together." Time stopped making sense. All the clocks froze at the same hour. The windows showed nothing but a flat gray mist. The house wasn't physically locked. It simply wouldn't let them leave. When Lois disappeared, Stewie finally went to the basement, the only place the brother never entered. In the far corner, he found Peter, beaten, exhausted, barely conscious. When he saw Stewie, he whispered, "That thing isn't your brother. It's not a child. It came here because of you." Stewie demanded to know what that meant, but Peter only repeated, "Don't look it in the eyes. Whatever you do, don't look." Footsteps sounded above them, soft, gentle, too controlled. Stewie and Peter turned toward the stairs as the brother began to descend. But with each step, his body seemed to grow slightly taller, slightly more stretched. It all started like a completely normal evening in the Griffin house. Peter was sitting on the couch flipping through channels when he noticed the TV kept switching back on its own to some blank gray screen, even though he was sure that channel didn't exist before. He called out to Lois, but she shouted from the kitchen that she was busy, so Peter walked closer to check it out. As he got nearer, he noticed something strange. Way in the back of that gray screen, there seemed to be a figure standing still, and it looked a lot like him, but the way it moved was off, almost like an old video lagging with little glitches. Peter tried to turn the TV off, but the remote stopped responding, and he could have sworn he heard someone quietly saying his name through the speakers. He called the kids, but the whole house suddenly felt empty, even though everyone had definitely been inside just a minute ago. Then the lights started flickering, not fully turning off, just twitching like something was messing with the electricity. From the hallway came slow, dragging footsteps, like someone was walking without lifting their feet properly. Peter stepped out to look and saw Stewie standing perfectly still, staring at him with this tense look on his face, like he was trying really hard not to say something. On the floor next to him was an old toy walkie-talkie he hadn't used in years. Peter asked what was going on, but Stewie quietly told him not to turn around, because whoever was behind him looked like Peter but wasn't Peter, just some strange version. Peter felt a chill run up his back, unsure if Stewie was joking or serious. He slowly turned anyway and saw a figure that definitely looked like him, but its movements were weird. Too sharp, too sudden, like frames were missing every time it shifted. The figure didn't talk, didn't make a sound, just tilted its head a little, almost like it was studying him. The lights flickered hard, and when they came back fully, the strange version of Peter was gone. Peter spun back to Stewie, but Stewie was already backing away, saying the house felt wrong, like something inside it had changed places without anyone noticing. Peter tried to calm him down, but then the TV in the living room switched on by itself again. This time it was showing a live view of an empty room in the house, and the camera was moving on its own, as if someone invisible was walking around holding it. In the corner of the screen, Peter saw a small figure that looked like Stewie, but it moved strangely, like the recording kept jumping forward and backward. The camera zoomed toward the little figure, and it whispered something unclear, almost like it was telling them to leave. The screen went black, and the entire house lost power at the same time. Later that evening, neighbors walking by noticed the front door slightly open, no lights on, nobody answering. And yet, the TV inside still turned on by itself every now and then, showing empty rooms that should have been completely still, but weren't. It all started when Brian became just a little quieter than usual. He stopped cracking jokes, barely argued with Stewie, and didn't complain about anything. At first, the family thought he was just tired, but within a couple of days, they noticed Brian's breathing had changed, deep, slow, almost like something inside him was shifting. Peter joked it was allergies, but Lois was the first to see the muscles on Brian's back twitch, as if something under his fur was growing. That night, Brian paced around the house for hours, and every step he took sounded heavier, like he'd somehow become bigger. When Peter turned on the lights, Brian slipped into the shadows as if trying to hide. And the next morning, everyone noticed he actually was taller. Not by much, but enough to make everyone uncomfortable. On the third day, Meg disappeared. Peter walked through the whole house calling her name, but there was no answer. Brian just sat in the kitchen corner, staring at Peter without blinking, as if he knew more than he wanted to admit. Peter asked, "Brian, did you see where Meg went?" Brian slowly turned his head away. On the fourth day, Chris vanished too. His door was open, his bed messy, and his window lifted just slightly. When Peter approached Brian again, the dog didn't even look up. He just let out a long, deep breath. And in that moment, Peter thought Brian's shoulders looked broader, his claws just a little longer than before. On the fifth day, Lois never came down for breakfast. Peter searched every room in panic, calling her name, checking closets, looking outside. Nothing. The house felt too still, too empty, like something underneath it was breathing. He rushed to Brian, yelling, "Where's Lois? What's happening? Why won't you say anything?" But Brian only lifted his eyes that had grown too dark, too deep, reflecting something feral and enormous. By now, Brian took up almost half the kitchen. His chest rose and fell like a massive beast's, and his neck and shoulders were far too large for a normal dog. That night, Peter woke up to heavy footsteps moving slowly through the hallway. He stepped outside his room and saw a massive shadow passing the living room doorway. The shape was vaguely Brian-like, but far taller, almost reaching the ceiling. Peter wanted to call out, but in that moment he realized he was completely alone. Everyone else was gone, and every time he asked Brian about the missing family members, Brian simply stayed silent. On the final night, Peter gathered his courage and approached the living room. Brian was there, fully transformed now, enormous, broad, monstrous, his body rising and falling with slow, thunderous breaths. He sat in the center of the room, staring into the darkness like he was listening to something only he could hear. Peter stood a few feet away and whispered, "Brian, do you understand what you've done?" Brian slowly turned his head, looking straight at Peter with a gaze that had none of the old Brian left in it. The lights flickered. For a split second, the room was swallowed by darkness, and when the lamps came back on, Peter was gone. The house was silent again. Only Brian remained, massive, motionless, staring into the empty living room. And that's where the episode cut to black. It all started so suddenly. One morning, Peter woke up in an unbelievably good mood. Not just cheerful, unnaturally cheerful. He smiled wider than usual, spoke in a soft, polite tone, cleaned the breakfast dishes without being asked, and complimented everyone for the smallest things. Even Lois admitted she liked this new Peter. He asked Chris about his day. He helped Meg pack for school and told her she deserved to feel appreciated. He picked Stewie up and hugged him, gently, evenly, a little too long. The family adored him. No one questioned it. Only Brian watched him carefully, though he didn't say anything. Day by day, Peter became increasingly perfect. He anticipated everyone's needs before they spoke. He timed breakfast perfectly, cleaned the house top to bottom, never raised his voice, never argued, never complained. But the strangest part was that his smile never left his face. Even when he thought no one was looking, his expression remained fixed, stretched, smooth, almost glued in place. One night, Lois woke up and saw Peter standing in the hallway with his back toward her. Completely still, completely silent. When she asked what he was doing, he turned his head far too slowly and said, "Just watching over the family, making sure everyone is safe." By the third day, the house itself began to react to him. Lights flickered whenever he walked past. The TV turned on the moment he sat in his recliner. Sometimes his shadow stretched strangely across the wall, taller, sharper. But whenever Lois blinked, it snapped back to normal. The kids didn't notice any of it. They said, "Dad's just better now." But Lois couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was too good, too controlled. One afternoon, she went down to the basement to find an old box, despite Peter telling her more than once, "Please don't go down there yet. I'm fixing something." The basement door was cracked open. She stepped inside. The single bulb hummed weakly overhead, and in the far corner, slumped against the wall, was Peter, the real Peter. Dirty, exhausted, wrists tied, shirt torn. He lifted his head slowly and whispered, "Lois, that thing upstairs isn't me. Please don't trust him." Lois stumbled toward him, trembling, when she heard footsteps above her, slow, steady, confident. The basement lights sputtered. Then the false Peter appeared at the top of the stairs, the perfect one, the smiling one. His expression didn't change at all. His eyes reflected the basement bulb like polished glass. "Lois," he said softly, "there's no need to worry. I'm the better version." She shielded the real Peter with her body. She tried to ask who, or what, he was, but nothing came out. The false Peter took one step down, then another. His smile stretched slightly wider, past the point where a normal face should move. "You both stay here," he said calmly. "The family needs someone who does everything right." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked from the outside. Lois pounded on it, screaming, but the house did not respond. The lights flickered, then went out. The final shot of the episode was the living room. The kids sat quietly beside the new Peter. He gently patted Meg's head, straightened Chris's collar, and held Stewie on his knee. They smiled. They leaned into him. They accepted him. Nobody asked why their father no longer blinked. Nobody noticed that he never once stopped smiling. The episode cut to black.